Every year, there are a handful of indies that blow past their niche audiences into the mainstream consciousness, and in 2025, one of those games was Blueprints, an addicting roguelike puzzle solver with a story hidden deep in the walls of that magic house, and that awoke something in me. Never before have I been so excited to whip out a notebook, likely my first taste of what I believe is defined as a Metroidvania, as I chased a path to the 46th room. You know Blueprints, you've seen Blueprints, it was up for Game of the Year, but an indie much less spoken about outside of the reviewer circles, yet similar in size, scope, and vision, and equally deserving of all the attention that can come its way, is the Séance of Blake Manor. This is a supernatural detective game set in Ireland in the 1800s and surrounding, get this, a séance at a place called Blake Manor. It's a game all about opening doors, physically, spiritually, metaphorically, and it opened a specific door for me that has spent years waiting for the right key. Blake Manor combines two things I love dearly, puzzles and gentleman sleuths, two things I have seldom explored in my gaming tastes. I like puzzles in games. Who doesn't like puzzles in games? Resident Evil type puzzles, mandatorily optional open world puzzles, regular puzzles with a satisfying solution, yet rarely do I actually play puzzle games, despite my consistent yearning to play Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Gentleman Sleuths, on the other hand, I love through cinema, the committed investigator who remains at the fringes of our cast. While their relationships are between one another, his is with fact over fiction, right over wrong, a borderline pretentious righteousness, leading him, and thus us, to the grand reveal. Depending on your flavour of choice, they may be ridiculous, withdrawn, or on drugs, or all of the above, and if you have the correct preference, then they will be slaying all the way. Two things I love, but seldom have explored in gaming, except for the place these loves originate from. A small, yet curious village with puzzles for currency. You better be good or I swear on Benoit Blanc. Professor Layton has, or at least had, all the things that I love about both of these, wrapped in whimsical character and comforting presentation. But these things are at an arm's length to each other. Layton's gentlemanly powers pursuing the truth of a mystery with kindness and grace, that iconic top hat running through the streets, is the narrative we experience. The puzzles are gameplay only. In the first game, especially, the puzzles are so rarely connected to the narrative that it's basically an unwritten rule not to question why everyone has puzzles laying around. Layton had jimmied that lock inside my pipe-smoking heart, but I was still searching for the key, and after getting very close to scratching that itch in Blueprints, I found it at Blake Manor. The Séance at Blake Manor is a simple game. You play as Declan Ward, a private investigator from Dublin, who is anonymously invited to Blake Manor to investigate the disappearance of one Evelyn Dean. In more recent years, the manor has become a hotel that Miss Dean was staying at and seemingly never left. Your goal is to explore the manor, investigate the impending séance and its many participants to find an answer to the mystery, and this investigation is where the game's strengths lie. You're quickly introduced to the focus on individual mysteries that come together to form a bigger picture, as well as your main tools in a Friday night arrival that acts as your tutorial. Searching and interacting with the environment to look for clues, analysing the staff and guests and questioning them about the leads you've come across, these will be your methods. As you fill in the gaps of the mystery and find key pieces of evidence, they will be added to an expanding mind map that helps you direct your investigation and draw conclusions. The grand séance taking place Sunday evening is your deadline, as after that you will lose your chance to uncover the culprit and all the attendees will go their own ways. Thus, for a deadline to be effective, there must be a fire nearby thine behind. Your central motivating factor is that most actions have a time cost, from the standard 1 minute to inspect most objects or question someone, to a larger chunk of time for set events and, of course, breakfast. Mr. Ward has one weekend in Blake Manor to solve this mystery, making it imperative that you manage your time wisely. Follow the leads, cut the fat, keep track of everyone's actions, and make time for your own motivations. This constant push and pull between what you have to do and what you want to do has you rushing around the manor's nooks and crannies, fueled by the love of the chase. I do so hope you look forward to taking down everyone's shoe sizes. If the only problem were the supposed disappearance of Miss Dean, then I'm sure old Declan would have had it solved by luncheon. But as is the case with any good mystery, whether that of an oriental train or perhaps an onion made of heated sand, it is not so simple. The disappearance of Evelyn Dean and the events surrounding the grand séance and its attendees are the same puzzle to solve. Every character in the building is their own established NPC and has their own reasons for attending the séance, be they magical practitioners, skeptics, scholars, or harbouring external motivations, or perhaps they're just the staff. they all have a small arc of their own for you to figure out and resolve. And in the process of learning about these characters, you'll also fill out the events of the previous days and come closer to understanding what happened to Evelyn. The Manor's occupants are but the second layer, however, so before I risk skipping over the aforementioned magical practitioners, I feel I should make clear that Blake Manor is super haunted. For the most part, we are operating in the world we know, if a few hundred years before our time, as the Great Famine is still in memory. But ghosts, mystics, and seances are not just fringe beliefs, but reality. That's made clear to you approximately 2 minutes in when Declan catches his first sight of the supernatural, the first of many, I assure you. The Séance of Blake Manor has a light horror dressing drizzled over the top of this delightful mystery game, and it is used to great effect in creating an atmosphere of impending dread. It's not one to jump scare you, only to highlight the terrifying nature of the human condition and the diabolical things we can be tempted to do. The character storytelling and atmospheric experience are where we see the heights of Séance of Blake Manor, a fairly short and sweet detective mystery that loves to intertwine oft-forgotten Irish culture, history, and myth, which is a selling point all on its own, but I'd seek out the opinions of a native to get a clearer picture on that, as I am British and that feels inappropriate. This is especially the case as the puzzling is really quite light, more there to be interactive than any kind of particular challenge. You'll see many complaints that the puzzles are too easy, a frequent example being that most coded locks have their answers within the immediate vicinity, so I feel it's important to stress that the appeal of this game is in its unfolding mysteries and not the complexity of its puzzles. If you were to interact with the game as it presents itself to you, then discerning the identity of the culprit should come fairly naturally by the end of the game. I had a few suspects left at the end of my first playthrough, but I was so sure I had the right guy that I went for it anyway, and not gonna lie, I felt like a genius. But coming to understand the secrets and truths of Blake Manor are more than their own reward. Speaking of Blake Manor, when combined with the heightened visual design and frequent comic-style presentation, becoming beautifully reminiscent of classic mysteries, whodunits, and Cluedo, Blake Manor itself acts as the final character and totally doesn't make me think of the Knives Out mansion. What starts as a dreary, blatantly haunted building in the middle distance gradually unfolds across your short stay. Once unfamiliar halls crowded with portraits and rich people paraphernalia will start to burn their layout and all the things they hide into your massive, mind map-shaped brain to the point where even someone with my incredibly lacking sense of direction will start to find their way around. Iconic locations like the hedge maze, the drawing room, and, of course, the dining room will be like old friends by the end of your time here. As an investigator, it is your job to get familiar with your environment, to discern the typical from the important, but the walls of Blake Manor are alive with stories to tell, and your curiosity will transcend duty almost immediately. The seance does not work without Blake Manor, and not just because of all the stories buried in the brickwork, but because of the baggage the guests brought with them, and I don't mean the baggage in the luggage room. Everyone at this seance is haunted by their own ghosts, in some cases literally, driven to extremes by the weight of their pasts and the strange energies surrounding the manor, and this has led some of them to cross some lines. I need to talk about Gentlemen Sleuths for a second. Hold on, this will be a small detour. Of course, I have a love for the classics, your Sherlocks and Poirots, but there's a reason I have such a fondness for Benoit Blanc and Herschel Layton. The origin of crime, especially calculated crimes of passion, as are the core of the whodunit, is human emotion. What events could transpire to make someone commit the unthinkable? This is true even for those classic stories, but there is one weird aspect to them, which is that the sleuth is often emotionally removed from the rest of the cast. They typically have some attribute to distinguish them, dressed up almost like a superpower. They aren't simple like us, that's the only way they could possibly deduce the truth behind this heinous crime. And I mean, it makes sense. They're the headline character, and if they were an average Joe, it would get boring pretty fast. But this isn't really the case with Blanc and Layton. They're eccentric, undeniably so, unless you know someone else who is unironically wearing a top hat through London and is the last living participant of chivalry, but their eccentricity lies in a different part of their character. Layton has an unhealthy puzzle addiction that has extended to getting involved in actual crimes, and Blanc stands out as the only southerner for 100 miles and getting a genuine kick out of solving the mystery. But one thing they both share is a serious re-injection of humanity. Layton's code effectively rests on everyone deserves respect, and as an archaeologist, he has no interest in bringing a perpetrator to rest, only in getting to the bottom of a mystery and helping the people that need help, because it's the right thing to do. Wake Up Dead Man may have spent a good amount of time discussing if Blanc had turned these tragedies into too much of a game, but the climax in all three of those films always comes down to sincere humanity. A good nurse, mercy for my enemy,
shitballs!
Goddamn cinema, because these stories aren't about crimes. They're about people hurting. I mentioned that in the Séance of Blake Manor, every character has a small story of their own, and these are my favourite part of the game for the exact same reasons. Declan Ward is a man of God. To be fair, basically everyone is, one way or another. It's 19th century Ireland. He's a man racked with grief and burdened by guilt, driven entirely by a crime in his past, forever wondering if it could have been avoided. If he could have avoided it. He's got his own fears and regrets as a result of his past, so when he learns of the dark secrets you have conveniently scattered around your hotel room, he approaches you not with aggression or righteous fury, but compassion and forgiveness. This man frequently discovers some of the most diabolical shit, with what is effectively the tutorial case being one of the most extreme, and yet he never judges. Declan Ward doesn't care for the mistakes of your past. The man is surrounded by selfishness and depravity, never mind the fact that his grounded reality is unraveling in real time. Yet without fail, he chooses to believe that you can come back from this, and he will even help you turn the corner. There is a point where Declan questions why he's still here. With everything he's seen and the fact that it only seems to be getting worse, why doesn't he just leave? He was paid enough up front to last him a good long time, and he's rational enough to realize that most of the people are there of their own volition and thus are kind of asking for it. Ultimately, it's the fact that, at the very least, the staff had no say in the matter and don't deserve to be left to their fate that convinces him to stay. He's driven by innocence. Not a dogged innocence, one that leaves no room for failure, no, one much kinder. The Séance of Blake Manor is simple, pretty easy and maybe a little handholdy, but it is an immensely satisfying game to play. A sprawling, interconnected web of knowledge keeps you motivated and directed while you explore a wonderful location and interact with some strong characters, who I have completely forgotten to mention are all voice acted. It's a great time. But beyond strong presentation and gameplay, there is a deeper layer to the enjoyment here, one of expertly integrated culture and love of the classics. One that makes you feel like Batman, I mean an expert detective, as no story is irrelevant in the wider narrative that you are untangling. It makes you ravenous for the next clue, before you've spent enough time with these characters to simply care about their safety, and afterwards, well, I think it says enough that I had 2 playthroughs. My time in Blake Manor had me wanting to not only solve this mystery, but to save every single person attending the grand seance, simply because they needed saving. In playing the Séance of Blake Manor, I unlocked the masculine urge to become a gentleman sleuth, and I am desperately looking to find that feeling again, so if you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. Now let's finish on who it's for. The Séance of Blake Manor is obviously going to appeal to the detective mystery fans. That is what this game is at its core, and that is the main appeal. If you don't like that, I don't know why you're here. It's for those who enjoy a gradually unfolding narrative, like that in games like Blueprints. They're not quite similar in terms of the gameplay function, just in the way that you are kind of hunting down the story. It's very satisfying. I find it quite a similar sensation. Also, if you like puzzle games, but you don't want to be the one taking your own notes, games like Blueprints, funnily enough, where you have to be writing down notes or you are absolutely boned to high heaven, can be a bit difficult to approach, shall we say. Something like Blake Manor that effectively takes the notes for you is pretty nice on the odd occasion. We also have fans of Irish representation, especially the history and the folklore side. This is not something you see being represented in games often, or frankly in any media often at all. And it goes pretty deep into some aspects, especially some like classical mythology, I think is probably the best way I can describe it. But it's a very cool intertwining of a culture you don't see too often. It's also not too long. It's a medium-ish sized game. It will range you from about 15 to just over 20 hours for one playthrough, depending on, you know, what kind of speed you're running at. I've got 29 hours in the game, and that is with 1.5 playthroughs, 2 playthroughs, but I was basically speedrunning 1/2 of the second one. As for the cautionary notes, again, the puzzle level is easy. It's not difficult in the slightest. Typically speaking, you will find the answer quite quickly. The things you don't have an answer for immediately, you will find them eventually. It's that sort of game. It's not crazy. It's just sort of the thing that keeps you going, keeps you engaged, you know. It also has small elements of very unintuitive design work. This kind of goes back to the not taking your own notes thing. The way the game is designed to start the characters' solo stories, as well as find the information you need for deductions, you're searching for very specific pieces of information. And I can think of 2 counts where the place you get that information from would not seem super obvious. one of them involves you using a menu that you only have to use for that one interaction, and that's a bit of a pain in the ass. Looking at the achievements list, most people manage to figure out the whole game on one playthrough, so it's really not the end of the world. It can just trip you up a bit. There's also the minor time pressure thing. It really isn't a big deal. Time does not move forward unless you are interacting with something, and it very much tells you how much time it's going to take. Even then, losing time isn't the biggest deal. It's just that characters move around and events start every hour. That's the main reason that time needs to move forward, and of course, moving toward the seance. It's not like bearing down on you all the time. It's very easy to kind of just glide through the game very casually. Yeah, I don't think it's a big issue, but I know a lot of people don't like time thingies in any way, so I get it. Some concluding words then. The Séance of Blake Manor is a heavy recommend from me. I actually planned on playing it back to back with Routine at the end of last year, and I wish I had, just so I could have considered it in the Game of the Year conversation. This is one of my favorite games I've played for a while. Just a great time. Thank you for watching if you made it to the end. Got some stupid big things planned for later in the year. Hopefully it actually will be this year, but likely smaller videos till then. Let me know if you liked the slight multimedia aspect to this video, and I will see you in the next one.